The night of the mating ceremony was cold and clear, and the moon hung heavy over Blackthorn territory like a silver eye watching every wolf below. Alira Voss stood at the edge of the gathering, her hands folded in front of her, her unseeing eyes turned toward the sound of drums and laughter she could not share. She had been blind since birth, and in a pack that worshipped strength, sharp eyes, and quick claws, she had learned long ago to make herself small. She was an Omega, the lowest rank in the pack, and she had never expected the moon spirits to notice her at all. Yet when the ceremonial fire rose, and the elders called the names of the bonded pairs, a hush fell over the crowd. The silver thread of fate, visible only to the pack's oldest seers, curled from Alira's chest and stretched across the clearing to the man standing at the very top of the stone steps. Alpha King Draven Ashwood. Draven was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and eyes the color of a winter storm. He had ruled Blackthorn since his father's death, and he had done so with a coldness that kept even his closest warriors at a careful distance. Rulers from 3 neighboring packs had come to witness the ceremony, hoping to see him matched with a wolf worthy of a king. Instead, the moon spirits had chosen a blind Omega girl with a plain gray tunic and trembling hands. The clearing went silent. Then came the whispers. Draven's jaw tightened. He looked at Alira as though she were a mistake the universe had made and forgotten to correct. In front of his warriors, in front of rival kings who would carry this story back to their own territories, he could not accept her. His pride would not allow it. A blind Omega cannot stand beside a king, he said, his voice carrying across the clearing like a blade. The words struck her harder than any physical wound could have. He stepped down from the stone platform, took her wrist, and pressed his claws lightly against her skin in the old mark of rejection, a gesture no wolf had used publicly in a generation. It was final, it was humiliating, and it was witnessed by everyone she had ever known. Alira did not cry out. She simply lowered her head and let the elders lead her away, back toward the small hut at the edge of the territory, where the outcasts and forgotten wolves were sent to live out their quiet, unimportant lives. That night, alone in the dark that had always been her only home, something inside her shifted. It began as a tremor beneath her ribs, the same place where the silver thread of fate had once connected her to Draven. She felt her wolf stir in a way it never had before, restless and awake, as though a door long sealed had finally creaked open. Images began to form behind her blind eyes, not sight exactly, but something deeper. She saw threads of light stretching between every wolf in the pack, threads that pulsed and shimmered and told stories only she could read. She saw a young scout named Corin, and around him, a thread that flickered weakly, warning of an ambush near the eastern ridge before the next sunrise. She saw an elder woman's thread beginning to dim, a sign that her time was near, peaceful and unafraid, and when she reached, almost without meaning to, toward the golden thread that belonged to Draven, she saw shadows curling around it like smoke. Betrayal, blood. A blade meant for the king's back, wielded by someone who stood close enough to call him brother. Alira gasped and pulled back from the vision, her heart pounding. She did not owe Draven anything. He had rejected her in front of the entire pack, had marked her with shame that would follow her for the rest of her life. And yet the threads did not only touch him. If the king fell to betrayal, the chaos that followed would spill onto every wolf in Blackthorn, guilty and innocent alike. She thought of Corin, young and eager, walking straight into danger he could not see coming. By morning, she made her decision. She was blind, yes, but for the first time in her life, she understood that her blindness had never been an empty space. It had been a door, closed until grief and rejection finally forced it open. She walked into the heart of the pack grounds and found Corin preparing for his patrol. When she warned him to avoid the eastern ridge before sunrise, he laughed at first, certain the rejected Omega girl had lost her mind from heartbreak. But something in her voice, steady and certain, made him hesitate. He changed his route out of simple caution, telling himself it cost him nothing to be careful. That evening, hunters from a rival pack were found waiting exactly where Corin would have walked, weapons ready for an ambush that never came. Word spread quickly. The blind Omega girl had known. Alira did not seek out Draven. She had no desire to stand before him again. to see the coldness in his winter storm eyes. But the pack began to notice her differently now. Warriors who had once looked past her began to glance her way with something like caution, even respect. When an elder's illness worsened exactly as she had quietly predicted days before, the whispers turned from mockery to something closer to awe. Draven heard the stories, of course. He heard everything that happened within his territory. At first he dismissed them as coincidence, or as pity dressed up in rumor. He had rejected her for good reason, he told himself. A king needed strength beside him, not a blind girl chasing shadows for attention. But then came the night his beta, Kale, nearly lost his life. Kale had been Draven's closest friend since childhood, the wolf who stood beside him through his father's death and the difficult years of taking the throne. Illyra, walking near the training grounds, felt the golden thread nearest to Draven's own begin to darken and fray. She saw, in a flash of vision sharper than any before, a blade hidden beneath a training cloak, meant to strike Kale down during a sparring match, meant to look like an accident. She ran, blind and stumbling but sure of her path in a way she had never been before, and reached the training grounds just as the match began. She called out a warning, her voice raw with urgency, and Kale turned half a second before the hidden blade would have found his ribs. The blow that should have killed him only grazed his side. The training yard erupted into shouting. Guards seized the wolf who had struck, a younger warrior who confessed under pressure that he had been paid, though he refused to name the one who had paid him. Draven arrived moments later, his eyes finding Illyra standing pale and shaking at the edge of the crowd. For the first time since the ceremony, he looked at her not with dismissal, but with something that resembled fear that he had been wrong. He summoned her to the great hall that night, alone. The fire crackled between them as she stood before the throne she had once been forbidden to approach. He did not apologize. His pride would not yet allow that much. But he asked her, quietly, what she saw when she looked at him. Illyra hesitated. The vision of shadows and betrayal still lingered at the edges of her mind, sharper now, closer. She told him the truth. She told him that before the next full moon, someone close to him, someone he trusted completely, intended to see him dead. Draven's expression hardened. He asked her who. She told him she did not yet know a name, only a feeling, a shape in the shadows that stood near enough to touch him. He did not believe her, not fully. He had built his rule on strength and certainty, and the idea that unseen threads controlled the fates of his pack was difficult for a king to accept, especially from the same girl he had humiliated only days before. But he did not send her away either. Instead, almost against his own will, he asked her to remain near the pack house, where he could keep watch over the wolf who might yet save his life, or might be lying to gain his favor. Illyra did not do it for him. She told herself this every night as she lay awake in the small room she had been given near the pack house, listening to the distant sounds of wolves who did not know how close their king stood to death. She did it for Corin, for Kale, for every ordinary wolf who would suffer if Blackthorn fell into chaos. But some nights, when she reached for the golden thread connected to Draven, she felt something else stir alongside her resentment. A thread of her own, thin and fragile, still tied to his, in a way rejection had never truly severed. As the days passed and the full moon drew nearer, the shadows around Draven's thread grew darker and more defined. One evening, sitting quietly near the fire while the pack slept, Illyra finally saw a face within the shadow. It was Lyra, Draven's most trusted advisor, the wolf who had served his father before him and had never once been questioned in her loyalty. Illyra brought the vision to Draven at once. He refused to believe it. Lyra had raised him in some ways after his mother's death, had guided him through every difficult decision of his early reign. The accusation felt like a betrayal in itself, and for a moment, Draven's anger turned toward Illyra instead, accusing her of jealousy, of trying to tear down the one wolf who had always stood faithfully beside him. Illyra did not argue. She simply told him that fate did not care about loyalty built on years of trust, only on the choices a wolf made in secret. Then she walked away, leaving him alone with his anger and his fear. 3 nights later, on the eve of the full moon, the shadows in the vision finally closed in. Lyra had made contact with a rival Alpha King, seeking to seize Blackthorn's territory, offering him a path into the heart of the pack in exchange for a place of power once Draven was gone. The coup was set to begin during the full moon gathering, when the pack's strongest warriors would be distracted by ceremony and celebration. Alira felt the danger rising like a storm behind her ribs. She went to Draven one final time, not waiting for his permission, and told him everything the visions had shown her. This time, with Lyra's recent strange behavior weighing on his mind, he listened. When the attack came, it came fast and brutal. Rival warriors slipping through a gate Lyra had left unguarded, chaos erupting across the gathering grounds. Alira, blind but guided by threads only she could see, moved through the fighting with a certainty that startled even the most seasoned warriors. She called out attacks before they landed, warned Kael of a strike from his blind side, pulled Corin back from a blow that would have ended his life. She found Draven in the center of the chaos, locked in combat with two warriors at once, while Lyra circled behind him, blade drawn, waiting for the moment his guard would finally break. Alira did not think. She ran toward the golden thread that had once connected her to a king who had rejected her in front of everyone she knew, and she threw herself between him and the blade meant for his back. The pain that followed was sharp and blinding, though she had never needed sight to know true darkness. Draven turned in time to see her fall, and something inside him broke open completely. He fought with a fury the pack had never witnessed, driving back the attackers and finally exposing Lyra's betrayal before the entire gathering. The coup collapsed as quickly as it had begun, rival warriors retreating into the night, Lyra captured and stripped of the trust she had spent a lifetime building, only to destroy in a single night. Draven carried Alira back himself, refusing to let anyone else touch her, begging quietly for the moon spirits to spare the wolf, who had saved him twice over, despite everything he had done to her. She survived, though the wound left a lasting mark, much like the one he had once pressed into her wrist. When she woke days later, weak but alive, Draven was there beside her, his usual coldness replaced by something rawer and more honest than the pack had ever seen from their king. He knelt before her, not as a ruler, but as a wolf, who understood, finally, the depth of his mistake. In front of the pack that had once watched him reject her, he now asked for the chance to earn back what his pride had thrown away. Alira did not offer forgiveness right away. The mark on her wrist was still tender, and the memory of humiliation did not fade simply because he had changed. But she did not turn him away either. She told him that trust, unlike fate, could not be seen in threads or visions. It had to be built, slowly, one honest choice at a time. Draven accepted this without argument, something he had never done before in his life as king. In the weeks that followed, Alira remained near the pack house, no longer as a rejected Omega, hidden at the edges of Blackthorn territory, but as the pack's seer, respected and needed in ways she had never imagined possible. Wolves who once looked past her now sought her guidance. Corin visited often, grateful and unashamed to call her a friend. Even Kael, quiet and steady, began treating her with the loyalty of someone who owed her his life. Draven visited every evening, sitting with her by the fire, asking nothing more than her company. He did not rush her forgiveness, and slowly, without either of them naming it aloud, something new began to grow between them, built not on the demands of fate, but on the quiet, steady work of two wolves learning to see each other clearly for the first time. He had once called her blind. Now, as dawn broke over Blackthorn territory, Draven understood that she had always been the one who truly saw.